Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier, fought single-handed through the Injun War till the Creeks was whipped.
Hello and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to look at an odd one because it really goes by two names. Crockett is the original design that was built during the Star League era, but a lot of people know the Katana a little bit better because the Draconis Combine has been building the Katana for quite some time, and it's, well, literally a Crockett that's been rebranded. Both mechs are quite decent, and even the Crockett is one of the fairly fantastic one out there. And it was never meant to be a frontline combat mech. It was supposed to be a trainer originally, and most people would panic at seeing an 85-ton trainer out there. It's an odd thing also due to the fact that a lot of the components in it are interchangeable with a more common machine out there, the Battle Master. So it just has all the little quirks and the little weirdy things that you could expect from a late Star League era mech that was brought back to life thanks to all sorts of factories and all sorts of weird go-ons. So let's talk about this bad boy. When you look at training mechs, you have to remember that there's quite a few of them out there, or at least mechs that have been used as trainers. I personally learned to pilot on an adder that my parents had brought back from the expedition in a Clan Smoke Jaguar space. And there's a lot of pilots like that, especially in mercenary units or, you know, people in decently wealthy or noble families across the inner sphere. You sometimes have a few machines you're actually going to train on, and sometimes you train on the simulator for the machine that you're supposed to inherit from your dad, something along those lines. In training academies, people usually have their own machines. Most academies will have a set of chameleons, the standard training mech for most of the inner sphere, and a bunch of stingers, because stingers are dirt cheap, and just about everybody has them. Wasps are also quite common as a training mech. Locusts would seem like a common choice as well, but since they don't have arms, they're not as easy to pilot, and with pilots that are rather terrible, if they fall down and can't get back up, it'll be a problem bringing them back to the base. So people do prefer mechs with arms when they are dealing with training. Honestly, I mean, most people will tell you horror stories of sitting in the tiny little cockpit in the Stinger's head, but that's just how it is when you're training. Of course, the Star League Defense Force wanted and needed their own training mech because, well, going with what everybody else had was out of the question for such a large organization. Lankenberg Technologies was selected to do the new design, and they released the Crockett in 2735, to that particular measure. That makes the Crockett a machine from the later portion of the Star League era, and probably a machine that was not in production for as long as some of the others, or in as large of numbers as some of the others, which might explain what happens later. As an assault mech, the Crockett could still teach newbies how to walk, run, jump, target things. It had enough of an arm that if you fell down, you would be able to help it yourself get back up. And you had things that were able to shoot at various range, and you would be able to manage your eat curve fairly effectively. The problem really came when a lot of commanders started seeing the Crockett and liking just how good it really was, and wanted to have some for frontline units as well. Procurement through Blankenberg was limited. I mean, they weren't able to build as many mechs as they wanted, and with commanders asking for them for combat service as well as training, they just couldn't keep up. In training exercises, the Crockett was fantastic, and pilots could easily learn what they needed to do for just about every situation. Once the machine were put into combat service, though, especially during the American Civil War and the First Succession War, the life support system for the machine started showing some issues. Basically, it turned the thing into a sauna really, really quickly, and even if the mech was cooling down, the cockpit itself was not. So at least 3 pilots died from heat exhaustion and heat issues because of this. I mean, cooking in your own cockpit is a terrible way to go. Lankenberg tried to fix this over time, but let's face it, they came up with these issues during some of the most devastating wars in history, and it really never got fixed because, well, they didn't have the time to start pouring resources into that. Even though all of the successor states add a few Crocketts for training at the start of the first big ones, all of them were put into service at the start of the war, and all of them were pretty much destroyed. With the destruction of Blankenberg facilities and everything else that was going on, the machine became less and less efficient, and it basically went extinct. This changed around the War of 3039 as ComStar did drop a whole bunch of old Crocketts in Kurita's hands, and it was to defend them against Federated Commonwealth aggression, but a few of them were not as downgraded as ComStar would have wanted. The Kuritas also started renaming the machine to Katana, and Blankenberg facilities in the Combine space started to reproduce them as well, because like I said earlier, a lot of the parts are actually compatible with things from the Battlemaster, which Blankenberg was still building. So mixing those two things together, they got a new mech for the Combine, which they took advantage of in quite a few ways. While the Kuritans add their Katana in a few different upgrade kit, Presenter Marshal Anastasius Freddy Foch said that he wanted a bunch for himself, so he had the Blankenberg facilities on Terra also reactivated. When the Jihadis took over Terra, well, the Comguards kept the production right and sent them to Grumium Creations to keep their own production up. So you add Crocketts all over the place during the Jihad on all sides of the conflict. You add a few of them being used with C3 units, you add some with C3I units, and you add all sorts of things being used by everyone just because they add their hands on them. Surprisingly though, the 2735 CRK 5003-1 Crockett is not as advanced as you would think it is. It has some fancy bits and bobs from the Star League A days, but not that many. The base rare component on it would be the 15 double heat sinks, which became extinct fairly quickly, and that was keeping a Strand 255D engine cool while the mech was able to go 54 kilometers per hour. It's not super fast, but for a trainer, it should be enough. You've got a set of jump jets to teach people how to use jump jets, and it allows the Crockett to reposition fairly quickly. The body itself is made of standard alloys, so nothing too difficult to reproduce or fix there. And you've got 16.5 tons of plates, meaning that if the trainee falls down, if the trainee hits a cliff or anything of the sort, you should be able to fix it fairly easily, and it shouldn't go through the plates all that often. For a training mech, the Crockett is remarkably well armed, and it's equipped to teach people how to use all sorts of weapons at various range. It can snipe fairly well with a pair of, proprietary Blankenberg 25ER large lasers, and it backs a torso-mounted Blankenberg LB-10X autocannon, which is basically just a copy of a Mydran XL with 3 tons of reloads. You basically get very good range out of all of that, and you don't have any minimum range to worry about. The damage itself is okay, especially when you look at other mechs in the same era as well. Go axial to the large laser, you have a pair of small lasers as well, giving you a little bit more short-range damage, but it's not remarkably useful compared to the rest. Each shoulder also packs a 6-tube of SRMs with 2 tons of reload, so you can load a few specialty rounds if required. My only main concern would be the lack of case units on the thing. I would almost have taken out the small lasers and replaced them with case if possible. But really, what is the point of a trainer to train the elite of the elite if it only uses basic equipment? Well, the CRK 5003-1B is the Royal Star League upgrade kit for the trainer, and it uses a Gauss rifle as its main weapon with 2 tons of reloads. It's a bit more threatening from there. The SRM launchers are actually taken out, and the body is now made of endo steel rather than standard plates, which saves you a little bit of weight, which you redistribute all over the place. The ER large lasers are still on there, but the backup laser now is a medium laser, giving you far more punch, and 4 medium pulse lasers spread between the arms, center line, head, and torso as well, making you potentially a bit of a zombie mech. It's pretty decent. You know, I don't like medium pulse laser, but at the time this thing was released, there was nothing really better than medium pulse lasers to replace it. And it is able to snipe, it's able to get into brawling range fairly well. It's a very decent combat mech, and it was also something that you could use to train people on a variety of things. With the number of Crockett floating around the inner sphere, well, a lot of them were salvaged and repaired and re-repaired and all sorts of things over the year, and in 2881 there was a standard called the 5003-0. The main weapon are now the more common Magnum Mark III large lasers, and it uses the Blankenberg 10 class autocannon with 2 tons of reload. It's one less than the original, but it's still plenty to do what you need to do during the Succession War. And with that kind of weaponry, all of it's still at the same range, and it's a little bit longer than most brawlers would be able to do. Your heat sinks are downgraded to standard, which means you will not be able to just shoot everything that you have willy-nilly, but you keep the thick armor, a pair of small lasers, and the paired 6-tube of SRMs as well, so you are able to brawl and you are able to fight at multiple range. It's quite decent overall for a mech in its category. Later on, well, we have the introduction of the Katana in 3035. The CRK 5003-2 Katana was built off of loaned Crockett's from the ComStar guys and from spare parts that were found in the Blankenberg facilities on Seoul. It's a remix of a remix. It uses some parts from the original and most parts from a Battlemaster being reconditioned, so it does have a bit of the similar look until you pull off the armor. Then things start looking a little bit weird if you're used to the regular Crockett. It's still somewhat similar in terms of weapons and equipment, and the main gun is an LB-10X autocannon, probably the first mech to use that kind of weapon as a standard weapon in close to 200 years, maybe even more, 250 years or so, I would say, because it had already become common enough at the time, because it's not that difficult to build an LB-X compared to a standard autocannon. There are big changes, though, on the Katana. You strip off the armor to leave only 12.5 tons, and you buff up the number of heat sinks to 20 because those are singles, not double heat sinks. You are able to keep shooting those 2 large lasers and the LB-10X steadily without overloading your heat system, so it's a pretty good setup, even though it's a little bit riskier with less armor. That particular katana got incredibly popular over the years, and the DCMS decided to start making upgrade kits for it using some of their more advanced technology. In 3057, they released a common and slave version of this using a C3 system. The CRK 5003CM removes the small lasers and a tube of SRM to replace them with a C3 master unit to command an entire squad. On the other end, the CRK 5003C just removes the small laser and puts a C3 slave on the device. Both of them are still wildly popular in the DCMS, but you have upgrade kits floating around with double heat sinks rather than standards as well. For ComGuards, well, they decided that the Crockett was pretty good once they realized what they had, and they decided to release new device and new machines in 3062, fixing's probably the only major misgiving that I had with the original Crockett. They remove half a ton of plates in order to add a case system to protect the ammunition, which is all concentrated on the right side, which is a bit of an issue if you know how to fight these things, but I would have preferred to love to be spread around and maybe just remove another half ton of armor, but it's an easy way to do that particular upgrade. You have later models of this particular Crockett as well that use light ferrofibrous to compensate for the lost half ton of armor. There's enough room in the insides for you to be able to properly do that. In 3063, you add 2 different upgrade kits for the same machine using a C3I system, either the CRK 5003-4 or 5004-1, and that really depends on where it was built. If it was built on Terra by the word of Blake, it was one. If it was built by Chromium, it was the other. It was literally the same machine, just, where it was built made the big difference. And a little bit of the internal parts, the Chromium ones do use a little bit more of the Battlemaster bits, I would say. To include the C3I system, the SRM launchers are downgraded from 6-tube to 4 tubes, and some other things are also moved around. A minor upgrade is that the small lasers are now ER small lasers, giving you a tiny little boost in range for a tiny little increase in heat, and it's generally still good enough. It's a very decent upgrade, and the C3I is a very good system if you've got the network for it. The Word of Blake militias and their Free World League buddies also received a new Crockett with the CRK 5005-1 around 3070, which is a weird side grade with a lot of weird things around. The cockpit is now a small cockpit tied to a C3i computer, which was the style at the time. You have a light engine rather than a standard ear, making you a little bit more risky to be piloted and shot at, but that was also the style at the time for a lot of the Blakist machine. And you have improved jump jet on there, which is also the style at the time. The small lasers are completely taken out. The 6 tubes are replaced with 3 tube/racks of MML for diversity of firepower, and it's just very odd for a Crockett, but it does work. As the C3i system is no longer the thing that is in style, there is a modern version of this that is floating around, especially in the Free Worlds League. The whole cockpit assembly is taken out with the C3 system and is replaced with a standard cockpit and a regular C3 slave unit. You got half a ton of plates that is removed, and you get the ER small lasers being added back on the arms for a little bit of extra firepower. Many of the jihadi machines, and especially the Word of Blake militia machines, were converted back to that particular standard, which is more useful to a lot of the people in the Free Worlds League because they don't have C3i systems, but you are able to get various forms of C3 in various ways. Around the same era, you also have an upgraded version of the Katana coming out in 3071 with the CRK 5003CJ, which also has improved jump jets. To make room for this, though, the arm lasers are the ones that are heavily modified here, with a light PPC and ER medium laser being used coaxially rather than the large laser and small laser, which gives you decent range and okay firepower, but it's a little bit light in my opinion. As with any good Combine machine, and especially Katanas, you get a C3 slave unit in the head, as was the style at the time, and is still the style, to be quite honest, with a lot of Kuritan machines. Blankenberg's most recent version of the Crockett is actually a Katana derivative with the CRK 5006-1, which came out in 3108, smack in the middle of the Republican era. It copies the 5003 CJ in a lot of ways with improved jump jets and the light PPC ER medium laser assembly in the arm, but there's still significant changes around. The main gun is replaced with a Gauss rifle. That's a whole lot more punch if you ask me. And it turns you into a very good sniper mech, back to where it was originally, to be honest. The SRMs are replaced with Streak 6 tubes rather than the regular 6 tube, and all of the ammo and the Gauss rifle is protected by Case 2, meaning that you're pretty hard to kill at that point. Oddly enough, though, it doesn't have a C3 slave unit, which is what I would expect most of those Kuritan machines to still have. So maybe this thing was meant more for an export market. I am not quite sure. I don't have all the details. But what about the clans, you ask? Well, in the end, the Crockett had been used as the Star League trainer mech for quite a bit, and it did serve in that purpose as a trainer in the early clan era, but it wasn't upgraded or refitted to any other major model or any major modification. I have never seen a Crockett 2C as an example, or even a standard Crockett C is not something that I've seen. I mean, people probably learn to pilot the thing and then move on to an actual machine with actual good guns. There are a few examples of modernized Crockett that I have seen from Clan Seafox, where they take an original Royal Crockett with the Gauss, paired ER large lasers, pair medium lasers, and quad medium pulse lasers, and fit that all in with clan weapons instead. With the saved weight, they put an armored cockpit in, which is good for a trainer pilot, and you get 4 extra double eat sinks because, well, clan weapons and eating up a lot more, that's not a bad idea. It's just another thing that I have seen in any amount that would be significant enough to say that there is a official C variant. The Crockett is seriously a good machine, both in training, where it was meant to be, and in combat, where it was pushed into service. Unless you are someone who has heat exhaustion issues, where in that case, I hope you get someone to look at the coolant exchange system and the whole cockpit assembly. You can fix it. It takes a while and it takes a lot of work from the techs, but you can survive someone working on it. Most of the upgrade kits, though, I find a little bit lackluster just because the original Crockett is actually just that good. There's one with case, which is a good idea, and a whole lot of them have improved jump jets, which I never find to be a good idea. On the Katana size, the low armor for a mech its size at 85 ton is something that I don't quite like, especially combined with the lower speed that it has. A Zeus can probably outrun it and probably outfight it as well. There are upgrade kits for the Katana that exist outside of the Blankenberg environment. Go check out your local Shelby AMG dealers. They have kits ready to go for Katanas, which will make them a lot harder to kill and actually a lot closer to the original Crockett, which is probably what you would want to get in many cases. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.